Sweet. All right. This is Christy Renee here with Mind Rewire and Christy Renee Healing Ministries. Here with Shamina Plot. We are doing chatting with friends. So it's a new thing I'm trying out to see, especially with Shamina right now, because we always tend to have these crazy conversations. And towards the end of them, one of us is always going, we should have recorded that. So now we are. Let me hit this thing over here to see how this works. Did you get the timer?
I didn't get the timer.
Yeah. And we're playing around inside of Zoom just to see how it all works. So you're going to, oh, there we go.
I see it.
You're going to have to bear with us for a minute. So, Shamina, what's on your mind today?
Right. Well, we were having a great conversation yesterday, actually, about you and and about your many multiple lives and how multiple lives, sometimes we have the idea that it's maybe multiple lifetimes or different time sequences, but just in this Christy Mattoon life, you've lived so many, and I haven't even gotten to hear them all. So I'd love to hear more about that. Like, I've only known you as a healer, but what else have you done?
Oh, that's interesting. So let me give some background a little bit because what we were talking about, the way it kind of showed up was that we look at past lives as though you've died and then been born again and you're coming into different time periods. And what I was thinking when we were talking about this was that literally in this lifetime, I have died many what I'll call ego deaths or identity deaths just to get to where I am now. And I had never thought about it like that before. That was probably the first time that ever showed up in my awareness that from even like, I mean, I'll use the period of time when I had gained so much weight. I was about 300 pounds. And I don't know how to say this nicely, killing that fat person, killing that identity that became that for whatever, because I wasn't always like that. I was never a heavy child. I was never a heavy teenager. It happened due to medication and food poisoning. That's the only thing I can come up with. And then the mental junk that went on with all the illnesses. But that literally had to die, and I had to be reborn in this life in order to move on from that. And in that place, in that part of me that was heavy, and it was so bizarre getting rid of that, because from that I went from pastry chef. I was a pastry chef, 300 pounds. I mean, at some point I quit getting on a scale, but ended up losing all the weight in less than a year and a half, and the bulk of it in 8 months, and was a personal trainer. So I went from iteration to iteration in this lifetime. But I think it almost got easier to look at it like that part died and this part was born. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, totally. What do you think though that you did, or like, how did you get from changing the identities? What made you realize that, one, that you could do it, and two, how to do it?
Oh man. Um, interestingly, I think when I was a pastry chef, there was a long period of time when I wasn't heavy. And it was at the point that our household changed so much because of the birth of my son and the issues that he had. And he was just a roller coaster ride. It was just up and down. And I had been told by a psychiatrist that I was bipolar, but he never asked me what was going on in our house. So it was the up and down of my son that was causing my ups and downs, because you literally just had to kind of ride the tide with it. And they put me on some crazy psychotropic medications that literally, I found out later, are what causes that kind of weight gain. And it happened so fast, I didn't see it coming. I mean, it was just bizarre. And the realization that I needed to change something was another doctor going, this is going to end. Like, you're killing yourself. Whatever you're doing, you need to stop. And It was a combination of things. It was a trainer that I met in a 24-hour fitness. It was a healer, an energy healer that I met that did brain integration work. In her very origins of being an energy worker, she was learning how to do this, and we became test subjects. My son and I both became test subjects for her. And it was watching her literally unplug. So from my childhood and issues with my mother, another life iteration, unplug my mother from my emotional body. And it was like that fast. And it literally stopped addictions that I had, like food addiction, right? Because I was getting fat. Oh, well, I'm fat, so I should just eat more, because then it makes sense of, it was weird. The whole thing was weird, but she unplugged all that. And when she unplugged that, I was like, wait a minute, what just happened? And I started slowly piecing out, like, there's more to this than what this body will do, what they've told us this body can do.
Do you feel like it was more the unplugging of the almost essentially programming, right? Because I know you've talked a lot about your mom and how she would call you names and
Yeah.
just was fun and not great. But then also her whole issue with her weight and the things that she basically was projecting onto you,
Yeah.
realizing that that was never yours in the first place, but you had to energetically disconnect that. Because I think there's a big difference between somebody logically knowing, like, oh, yeah, I can think through that. But then energetically, it's like, but I can't get over that. What do you think was
Sometimes you don't even know, like, I didn't even relate the two.
right?
I didn't relate the two until much after, we started trying to work on my son and heal some of his stuff, that there was a direct relation between what she had said and done and who she was. She could, I mean, I don't even mind saying it anymore. She was a great narcissist. She was amazing at her abilities in that world. She was amazing at it. And I never related the two, for the longest time. And when I realized the weight issue that I had wasn't necessarily like my fault, right? We blame ourselves. I do this wrong. I do that wrong. I eat too much. And it was all, I mean, that was everybody's viewpoint, right? It was, what are you eating? Like, I don't know. At some point, I was just like, I don't get it. So I started eating so I would have something to blame it on. I would literally go from fast food restaurant to fast food restaurant and just like eat.
Oh, wow.
I was like, there, that's my problem, is I eat too much. Now we can fix that. And it just literally made no sense. And at the point that I fixed that, and you start to understand the energetics, even though you don't know that's what you're doing. I could drive past a restaurant like McDonald's or a fast food joint and literally just put my hand up to it and say no, and it would cut off the energy.
Hmm.
Oh, that was funny. Did you just do that?
No, it
Oh,
just
I
popped.
raised my hand, so my hand raised. This is another AI thing that goes on inside. Did you see that?
Yes, yeah.
My hand, that creeped me out.
Don't
Uh,
reach.
that was crazy. Yeah, so it's I don't know, understanding some of those as the energetic function, like we actually can do that. And I learned more about that working in a gym, in the gym that I actually was losing all my weight in. I remember standing in front of, it was probably like a 12, or maybe, I don't remember the increments, a 12-inch high box. And I was supposed to be jumping up on it. So it's a foot, right? A foot high. And I'm supposed to jump onto the top of it. And I was petrified. I was petrified to make this body move. I was still pretty big. And he's like, just jump, just like do it. His name was Brian. And I was just totally petrified. And finally, he looked at me and he knew I had like this energy thing going on. I was starting to figure some of this out. He walked in front of me, stuck his arm like in front of me and then on the side of me. And he went, there, no energy is affecting you. Jump on the damn box. And it literally, like, everything went quiet. And I was like, whoa, like, you have no idea what you just did. And I jumped on the box like it was nothing.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, there you go. Okay, I got it. You know,
That is so awesome. So it seems like from all the stories too that we've exchanged over the years, we've known each other for some time now. You've always just had this sense of knowing the energy. And I know you had said too in your childhood that you kind of had these inklings. Like, what did you experience and how did you connect to the energetic world? And what do you understand it to be?
some of it I still don't understand.
Right.
One of the things, I mean, I don't have a lot of memories from my childhood, but some of the stuff I do remember was the more energetic stuff. And I used to always like going to sleep. You know, you find that place between sleep and wake, and I could stabilize myself in that space. And I would get this dissonance going on of like things moving or getting bigger and smaller and bigger and smaller. And I find this really interesting because in this is how they mess you up with all of this stuff between psychology and some of the, I mean, in energy, right? It's called dissonance. You get this wall, wall kind of feeling going on. And I told that to one of my psychiatrists one day when I was trying to, you know, work through my bipolar issues. And he was like, oh, that means you probably had a, like some kind of young childhood sexual encounter. That's what they, because I described it as bigger and smaller. And he's like, that was probably somebody probably sexually attacked you. And I was like, I don't think so. Like, I'm pretty sure that's incorrect. But he very forcibly tried to make me agree to that.
Oh, wow.
So bizarre, so bizarre. But I can get back in that space now. And what I have found out with that dissonance thing is it will throw you into a whole different area, a whole different dimension, whole different place. It's kind of a method of travel, is what I use it for.
Right.
But from childhood, that seeing things, I could always see things that were around me. I turned that off when I was older because I got to a point where I was like, this is insanity. And I thought it was part of my bipolar illness that I had. So I boarded it up and turned it off one day. Literally boarded it up. I took hammer and nails down towards this cave and packed it all in this cave that I created and then boarded it up so it couldn't come back out.
Wow.
Yep, pretty amazing. That worked well for a while until I was like, oh, like I boarded up a lot of friends. I got rid of a lot of entities that I talked to that were actually, they were helpful. They were my guides or whatever. So I had to go back in and undo it and take everybody. They were all like, seriously, like, what are you doing? Knock it off. They were still there. It was just in my head I had boarded it up, right? They never actually left. They just got quiet.
Right.
Yeah.
What
So
made you unboard them? Like, what was there something that had happened in your life, or what point of your life did that happen?
yeah, I was just getting more conscious and I was realizing there was just more to all of this than I had ever been taught. I grew up in a religious home. And even in the religious nature of what I grew up in, before I kind of swapped out some thought points on that, it was okay, what was Jesus doing? And how did he do it? And what I was shown, I mean, I was given a lot of tools that were just pretty outrageous, but what I was shown was that it's what we would, I guess, call tapping into that higher part of yourself. And, you know, we refer to it a lot of times as guides or angels, or, but what if it's really just your higher self? And we break it down into these little identities because we know ourselves as identities. I'm this part, I'm that part. So we have these parts of our higher self broken down into parts that we can relate to and can take on different meanings and different jobs for us. And letting that back out of the box was the only way I could move forward, out of the cave, as it were. Yeah, it's the only way I could keep moving forward.
Oh man. So when did you decide to start doing energy work? You had the life of doing pastry chef, you were a personal trainer. How did that transition into when I came to know you and being the amazing healer that you are?
Yeah, so I knew a gal named Barb Ambrozic. Still know her actually. I'm going to turn this timer off because it's actually bugging me. I thought it was useful, but let's see if I can. I'll just not show it. Um, so I met her. She was doing brain integration. She did that on myself and my son. And like I said, she had unplugged my mother from my energy field, is what I'm guessing. And it was so powerful that I literally um, lost all emotional anything. Like I kept looking at her going, I seriously do not have emotions anymore. Like as bad as it was before. And now instead of being all like they were just like, and it didn't feel good because it was so unnormal. I didn't know what to do with it. But I know now that would just be a state of neutrality or peace. And I actually love being there. But she didn't know what it was either because she was new to all of this. But because of what she was doing, because she was trying to work with kids doing this brain integration stuff that would change somebody so rapidly, it was intense. Um, she brought me into her office one day because I could see and I could feel things and I could tell you what you were, who was standing next to you and what all right, these I could describe all kinds of stuff that she was just like, whoa. And so she brought me into her office one day and she goes, I need to work on this kid, but he's in Antigua. And I need somebody to act like they're this kid or be a surrogate, right? She called it a surrogate. So I turned into a surrogate doing work for her. And whenever she needed somebody to be the body, I was the body because I could feel all of it. And she would do this little process and make me the surrogate. And literally my body would just change. I would just like slump over. She was working on a guy one day and something happened in the middle, and he was in Antigua too. But something happened in the middle of working for him, and I freaked out. I just flat out panicked because I could feel my leg dislodging from my body and couldn't distinguish whether it was my leg or his leg. Couldn't figure it out. I was just like, holy cow. So I was like, get me out, pull me out of here. I didn't realize I could pull myself out, that there's not that level of control, right? I'm either in your energy or I'm not. It's pretty simple. Um, but she turned the circuit off, right, is what we used to call it, and started calling down there to see what had just happened. And he had literally been walking down a sidewalk, walked through a pane glass window that people were carrying across to a building to put this glass in place. And they were carrying it and he didn't see it and walked through it and it sliced his leg open.
Oh man.
And I felt it when it happened. And I was just like, but it was stuff like that's it made it so real. Like, how would I ever know that? Or being able to use somebody else's eyes to read something or to look through their eyes to see whatever. And what I know now is it's because the energy isn't separate. It is all the same energy. We just have these separate attributes of it. And it's more from a state of what the person themselves focuses on. Your focus creates your beliefs and your perceptions. And I don't necessarily focus on what you focus on. And so that's the difference, the individuality between us. But I can still look through your eyes and see what's going on, right? Which is how I typically work with people. Because I try and see your life through your eyes.
Right. Which makes so much more personal. I feel like I've done a lot of energy healing even before I met you. I've learned all this stuff since I was actually little, but not until I met you. Then it was like somebody actually knows they're not guessing anymore. They're guiding. And it was a game changer. So what would you say, we were talking about yesterday of, since you've had all these identity deaths, what would you say for us that are struggling with identity deaths right now and kind of playing that pendulum swing, the teeter-totter of, I know that I have a spirit and that spirit's wonderful, but here's all these identities, the labels, the things I've been told all my life. What would you recommend for people to overcome that or to start working on that?
there's many ways you can work on it. There are many, I mean, as many stars in the sky, right? Whatever works for you. But what I would tell most people to do is sit down and write them down. Write down your identities so you know what you're working with, and then just sit there and watch them. When it shows up, point your finger at it and go, that's not me. Right? So if you separate the self, if you separate the little self, meaning the physical identity ridden self, from the spirit self, that's not the spirit. Spirit doesn't operate by identity. Right? So that's not the true you. If the spirit part is the true you, the I am self is the true you. All of those identities, you literally could just put your hand up and go, oh, no, I'm done with that. I'm not doing that anymore. Or you can play the game that they tell you to play, which is part of the new age process or program or whatever you call that, where you have to blip in and out. I'm not that. Oh, here she comes again. Running down the trail of
And more work. Yeah.
Or, I mean, you can just get serious enough to sit down in yourself and curiously observe from the state of your spirit that human aspect of you and go, okay, I see what you went through. I see how this is. I know that's not me. That's not me at all. And I just don't participate with it anymore. The lack of judgment, I keep talking about this even on my videos when I'm making them by myself, the lack of judgment has been huge, huge. Because the less I judge everything, the more real the I am self appears. And I want to almost say to the point that before it was like Christy's the human, Christy is this, that was me. That's who I knew as me. And then all of a sudden, Christy wasn't totally Christy anymore. There was this other aspect that I could see that I wasn't quite sure of. And then it kind of equalized where I could be the observer and I can observe from Christy the spirit thing, and I can observe from spirit this Christy thing and be like, oh, interesting. And now all of a sudden it's more spirit and I stay here longer and I'm watching. And once in a while I get drugged back in, but not so often anymore. So it's gone from one end of the spectrum to the other where I can just sit and be like, okay, I don't have to participate. And I think the words, right, what you say to yourself, you know this all too well. How are you talking to yourself? Yeah. We've even gone through with some people, I've gone through like cycles of separate yourself out by here's Christy and here's my I am self. And I would literally talk in those tenses. Christy is having an issue right now. Christy does not want, right? Whatever. Christy's having an issue breathing. Go ahead.
I said, third person is so much fun. It kind of makes you go, I have to look at this differently.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And the whole, I don't even know, talking to your, as that third person. And that's the illness. That's the identity. That's the out of alignment frequencies. Spirit is none of that stuff. None of it.
So what would you say for people that are going, okay, well, what is spirit then? How do I know that I'm in spirit? And how do I know that that's that? Like, and not just my monkey brain going or making stories up or creating some falsehood imagination, you know?
At the point that you have observed yourself long enough, you can't deny the difference. You will know that you know. And I think it's going to be different for pretty much everybody, the place that you come to or how you come to it, or everybody wants to sell you a protocol. Everybody wants to tell you you've got to go through this, like there's 7 steps that you need to, whatever. If you just literally got real enough with yourself that you could sit down and close your eyes, calm your body down, and observe whatever shows up in your brain, eventually you're going to start to notice that there's something observing. What's observing? What is it that's doing that? Because it's not your brain, right? And the brain is just part of the mechanical function of this. So, and you do that long enough, and then all of a sudden you'll notice that there's something observing the observer that's observing. And you look at that and you go, I want to look through those eyes. What the heck is that? I think GM described it the best that I've heard so far, GM Wolf. He said that if you view it all as it's an ocean, there's a huge ocean that's out there, right, of all this energy. And you took an ice cube tray and you filled up the ice cube tray with the water from the ocean and you froze it. And then you've got 12 separate ice cubes. And every ice cube is programmable. You can put blueberries in some and cherries in some, and you can put lemons in some, and they can all have different stuff in them, which is the personality, which is the identities. But at the end of the day, they're going to melt and they're going to go back into the ocean. And you realize that that part of you that's out here watching the watching is that part of you it's part of the ocean. It's part of all of the energy, which is why I can look through your eyes and see, because that's not different. That's the same. We're the same in that space.
So judgment really is that thing that disconnects us to not see, to be that ice cube where we're frozen and stuck, and really the illusion of it all.
I would have to say judgment is what causes all suffering. So religiously, I go back to my religious upbringing, they taught you that it was about forgiveness. And you have to get forgiveness from this entity that's higher than you, that's whatever he is, and that he's a he on top of everything else. I should just shut up. We won't go down that monkey hole. But you have to have forgiveness, right? And then you get into the new age world. It's like, oh, forgive that and forgive them, but forgive yourself. And we forgive ourselves and you forgive them and you forgive your mother and you forgive your husband and you forgive, and nothing ever freaking changes. And it pissed me off. So I started yelling at Yeshua one night. I've done this a few times. The F, dude. Like, if forgiveness works, why doesn't it work for me? And it took a few minutes and it took years after that to actually understand it. But it was like, it's not about forgiveness. The only reason you have to forgive is because you judged something. You judged yourself, you judged your parent, you judged your kid, you judged whatever, right? The book, you judged, I don't know, you judged whatever you judged. And everything, if you start really taking it apart, anything you call anything is a judgment of that thing. So if I go out and because of my learning about nature, the tree is a tree, it's wood, it's the leaves, it's the branches, it's the bark, it's the root underneath, and it sucks up stuff through the ground, what makes it all grow. That's it, that's the tree. So I call the tree a tree. And then I decide, okay, let's get rid of the label of that tree. And guess what I see? There's actually sentience in that tree. There's a spirit nature to that tree. I was like, no way. And I've been judging you, judging you for so long because I didn't know. And then all of a sudden you realize that and you start taking all of those labels off of everything, take the labels away. And what you will find out is your belief system starts falling apart. Without the labels, I have no belief system. And the labels are judgments, which causes me to have to beg for, ask for, right, forgiveness, give forgiveness. If you don't judge anything, there is no reason for forgiveness.
Makes so much sense. So with the monkey brain, that I would love to, after so many years of just constantly judging, you start getting that, because we've talked about this many times and for quite some time. And I noticed that sometimes my brain just goes and starts just judging, right? And sometimes it's like people want to have the excuse that, I know a lot of people that would say this, well, I can't help myself. This is just who I am. This is the way that my brain thinks. Like, how am I not supposed to? Well, you have to discern between good and bad, right? There's always good and bad, and you have to judge this. And well, what if there's a person that's going to come attack you? You have to judge that. What would you say to that, to stop the monkey brain, and like tips for people to be able to catch themselves and maybe even be able to correct it.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, to start with, there's different levels of consciousness. So depending on the level of consciousness where you're at when you're there, right? You might need to stand there and judge that guy's got a knife and he's about to come at me.
Right.
But if I become highly conscious in that arena, I will never attract that guy with a knife into my realm anyway. Right? So it stops that need for that judgment. At some place in this realm, because of the way this is structured, there is a need for that judgment. But as you lift yourself up consciously, that need goes away because I just don't bring those people into my realm. To undo it is to start paying attention to it. When do I do it? And I got really good at this. I started watching, and the second stuff would come up, I would just be like, no, that's not me. That's not me. That's not me. That's not me. Right. And I would keep putting X's on it or zeros on it, because zero in your head means nothing. Right. The X crosses it. I tried all kinds of stuff. Recently, what I ran across a guy that was talking about this kind of stuff, and he goes, just disconnect your eyes from your brain. And do that. And so, whatever that means to you, right? And I've done it with a lot of people at this point. I'm like, just see what happens. Disconnect your eyes from. So think about something. Think about the thing that disturbs you the most. And then disconnect your eyes from your brain. Close your eyes if you need to. Disconnect your eyes from your brain and watch what happens to it.
Total peace.
Yeah, it goes away. Because your eyes are connected into your brain through those nerves, right? The nervous system is connected. And your eyes, the inner eyes, will start looking at everything, whatever you're thinking about. It'll start giving you all these pictures, will start showing up to that thing. If you truly want to transmute it, quiet it down, get yourself quiet so that you can actively go in there and take it all and just put it inside your heart space. Your heart will transmute it into a form that your spirit understands and that your body is in coherence with. So anytime, I hate to use this as an example, but my daughter and I haven't talked in over 8 years, 9 years, and things will still show up that she caused, did, said, whatever. I'm judging her. All this stuff shows up, right? Yeah. And I'm like, okay, so I'll disconnect my eyes from my brain. I get control of it so it doesn't turn into a runaway freight train. And then I take all that information and literally with my awareness, move it from my brain into my heart and let my heart transmute it. And if you go on my YouTube channel, you'll find a place, a playlist that's called, I think it's called Beyond Heart Coherence. And inside Heart Coherence, there is a video about the ladder of awareness. And that thing about putting it into your heart is in the ladder of awareness. It's part of a protocol that my higher self at that time, called Angel, gave me. And I was like, wow, that's how you do that. And with your awareness, you can literally move information around in your body and start to neutralize the effects.
Yeah. I think it's beautiful that you've been able to get to this point where you realize after all this work and after all this time that it's always been you, that it's all a part of us, and that you are also me and everybody else that's listening. That if one person can do it, because that is the trueness of it, that's within them too. So I love the examples that you gave, and I love that you're just so wonderful and being in tune with people. You've been my life and for so many people. And I'm sure you're excited to announce too about what's going to be happening with Grandmaster Wolf. I'm glad that you mentioned him. How did you meet him, by the way? How did you?
Oh, goodness. In this lifetime,
Right.
I met him. Actually, I was watching I'm not going to remember the name of it, Next Level Soul podcast by Alex Ferrari. And Grandmaster popped up on it. And I was just like, oh, and he was saying stuff that was, forever. And I know you've had this experience too. You'll hear something and you're like, I know that. Why do I know that? How do I know that? I learned Psych K years ago, and I went through 3 levels of this class. And by the second one, I was standing next to our instructor going, why do I know this? Like there are people struggling doing these crazy protocols. And I'm like, I have no issue with any of this. I don't know why do I know this? And she's like, because you were there when it was created. You were probably, and it was Lemurian. It was what they say is a Lemurian. And I'm just like, holy cow. So there's things you know because you've already done them. You've already been there. You've already, right? And so those are, and he was one of those things. We'd known each other. He took me back to a lifetime at one point, just so I could see where we were at and how we knew each other. And he was actually like I think he was like a knight or something. He wasn't the knight. He was the guy who took care of the knight. And I was, squire. I was some kind of prophet or something that had come into town to tell these people, don't listen to them. Don't listen to the Roman council because they're about to walk you off a cliff. So I was already doing this kind of work, being like, be careful what you're paying attention to. And he said, that's where we met. And other lifetimes, mystics and magicians, and I mean, all kinds of stuff that I'm just like, holy crap. And here he shows up again. I'm like, dude, where you been? So what we're doing now is he wants to do he's calling it a fireside chat, and I'll be hosting his fireside chat. So we'll be on, I think, Sundays, starting on the 27th, and he'll just be getting on and answering. It'll be like a huge Q&A for 2 hours where people can come on. There's a fee associated, but a smaller fee than if you bought an hour and a half of his time or whatever, or even of my time. And you'll be able to get on and ask either one of his questions, but I would say more specifically him at this point, to get in and be able to. And I think the group setting, I love group settings because the energy can get so big, it can be so powerful when there's more than one. And I think that's part of this too, is getting that energy moving enough that we can cause some pretty drastic changes for people.
Wow, it's incredible. I'm super excited to hear what goes on, because I feel like when somebody asks a question, sometimes it's the question that you were gonna ask maybe 2 weeks from now, but then you got it when you needed it, and it's total enlightenment. It's just amazing to hear what comes out of that stuff. So
yeah, that's exactly right. I think that happens a lot. I was in a group not too long ago as a participant and had this question, and somebody like right before me asked the exact verbatim same question I was trying to, and I'm like, oh man, that was my question, but the answer was perfect. And then I could sit back and just keep listening and paying attention. So it can be really cool in that kind of an idea.
Right. Well, I think those are tips, and definitely something that everybody should be marking their calendars for, because that's going to be amazing. And then just, a little bit of the things we talked about, right? Heart coherence and being the observer and watching when the judgment comes and not judging yourself for the judging, which is big, right?
Don't.
Right? That type of preparation for people to be able to melt that ice cube and come back to the oneness of who they truly are.
Yeah. Well, this is super fun. We're going to try and do this weekly.
Yeah, for sure.
So that'll be fun. So stay tuned for chats with friends, I think we call this. So we're going to be doing that. And we'll have some kind of more information out about the GM stuff here probably this weekend, so people can start signing up. And yeah, it's amazing.
Great.
Thanks for being here.